Ethan Brooks pushed open the front door with his shoulder, one arm full of the contract folder he'd driven 40 minutes to retrieve, his mind already rehearsing what he'd say to his mother about why he was running late. Tomorrow he was getting married. Tonight he was supposed to be sleeping under his mother's roof, away from Claire, the way tradition demanded. But the merger paperwork couldn't wait, and the house was empty, and it would only take a minute. The house wasn't empty. He heard the water first, the shower running upstairs, steady and rhythmic. Claire must have decided to stay in tonight after all, he thought, setting the folder down on the hallway table. He climbed the stairs 2 at a time, already smiling, already planning to knock and tell her he loved her, and that tomorrow he'd be the luckiest man alive. Then he saw the wine glasses, 2 of them, sitting outside the bathroom door on the carpet, one smudged with lipstick, the other empty except for a ring of red at the bottom. Ethan's hand stopped an inch from the doorknob. He told himself it was nothing. Maybe her sister had come by. Maybe a bridesmaid. He opened the door anyway. Steam rolled out first, then the sound of Claire's laugh cutting off mid-breath. And there, behind the frosted glass, were 2 shapes, not one. Claire screamed his name. The shower door slid open so fast it nearly came off its track, and she stood there dripping, eyes wide with a terror that had nothing to do with modesty. Behind her, scrambling for a towel, was Marcus, Ethan's best friend since sophomore year of college. The man who was supposed to stand beside him at the altar in 14 hours holding the rings. Nobody moved for a long moment. The water kept running, hissing against the tile, the only sound in the room. Ethan didn't shout. He didn't throw anything, didn't lunge at Marcus the way some part of his brain screamed he should. He simply stood in the doorway, folder still in his hand, and asked in a voice so calm it frightened even him. "How long?" Claire's mouth opened and closed. Marcus wrapped the towel around his waist and wouldn't meet Ethan's eyes. "Ethan, it's not. This isn't what it—" "How long, Claire?" Neither of them answered, and in that silence, Ethan understood something that hurt worse than the affair itself. Their faces weren't the faces of 2 people who'd made one terrible mistake. They were the faces of 2 people whose secret had finally, after who knew how long, been dragged into the light. If the story already has your stomach in knots, imagine living it. Hit subscribe now, because what Ethan discovers over the next 20 minutes is going to make this bathroom scene look like the least shocking part of the night. And drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from tonight. I read every single one. For years. That's how long Ethan and Claire had been together. He still remembered their first date. A rainy Tuesday at a bookstore cafe where she'd laughed so hard at his terrible joke that she'd knocked over her coffee. He remembered the year his father died, when Claire had shown up at his apartment every single night for 2 weeks just so he wouldn't have to sit with the silence alone. He remembered getting down on one knee 6 months ago on a beach in Cabo, and the way she'd said yes before he'd even finished the sentence. And Marcus wasn't just a friend. Marcus was the guy who'd driven 6 hours through a snowstorm to help Ethan move apartments in college. The guy who'd stayed up with him the night his company almost folded, running numbers until 4 a.m. When Ethan needed a best man, there had never been a second name on the list. That was what made the bathroom scene so much worse than ordinary betrayal. It wasn't just his fiancée. It was the person he trusted most in the world, standing beside the woman he trusted most in the world, both of them lying to his face for who knew how long. Back in the present, Claire had wrapped herself in a robe, mascara running down her cheeks in gray tracks. "It was a mistake," she said. "One time. We were drunk. We didn't mean for it to." "One time," Ethan repeated flatly. "Then explain the wine glasses that have been washed and reused enough times to leave a stain ring. Explain why there's a spare toothbrush in my guest bathroom that isn't mine. Explain why, Claire, neither of you looked surprised when I asked how long. You looked caught." Marcus finally spoke, voice cracking. "Ettan, man, I sviar." "Don't," Ethan said, and something in his tone made Marcus actually flinch. "Don't you dare call me man right now." Claire tried again, quieter this time. "It's been a few months." There it was. Not a slip, not a drunken accident, months. Ethan felt something in his chest go cold and very, very still, the way water does right before it freezes. "Why?" he asked simply. "I don't know," Claire whispered. And that answer, more than anything else, told him she was lying about something. People who loved someone and betrayed them anyway usually had an answer, even a bad one. People hiding something bigger gave you nothing at all. Marcus tried to step forward, tried to put a hand on Ethan's shoulder the way he had 100 times before, but Ethan stepped back like the touch might burn him. And that was when he noticed it, the thing that would keep him up long after he left that house. Marcus wasn't ashamed. Marcus was afraid. There was a difference, and Ethan had known this man 15 years. He knew the difference in his bones. "What are you two afraid I'm going to find?" Ethan asked quietly. The question landed like a slap. Claire's face went white. Marcus looked at the floor. Nobody answered. Ethan grabbed his folder off the hallway table and walked out into the night without another word. He didn't slam the door. He didn't call off the wedding on the spot, the way any reasonable man might have. Instead, sitting in his car outside the house he'd bought for the two of them, he made a different decision entirely. He was going to find out exactly what they were hiding. He drove straight to his sister's apartment. Helen opened the door in pajama pants, took one look at his face, and pulled him inside without a word. He told her everything. The shower, the wine glasses, the months, the fear in Marcus's eyes that didn't match a guilty conscience. Helen sat very still on her couch, processing, and then her brow furrowed. "Wait," she said slowly. "This is going to sound like nothing, but has Claire been weirdly interested in your finances lately?" Ethan blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, at Sunday dinner 3 weeks ago, she asked Dad about combining accounts after marriage like it was the most casual thing in the world. And 2 weeks before that, she asked you about adding her name to the property deeds before the wedding instead of after. I remember because I thought it was sweet at the time. Forward thinking." Ethan sat back, his mind rewinding through the last several months. Claire asking him to sign documents before things get busy with the wedding. Claire suggesting they consolidate business ownership paperwork to simplify things. At the time, every request had felt like partnership, like a woman planning a life with him. Now it felt like something else entirely. He pulled out his laptop right there at Helen's kitchen table and logged into his business cloud drive. His stomach dropped. A folder, Ashcroft Holdings, confidential, had been accessed 4 days ago. He hadn't opened it in over a month. The password to that folder was known to exactly 2 people on Earth, Ethan and Marcus, who'd helped him set up the original security structure 3 years earlier. "Helen," he said slowly, "I think something's very wrong here." Helen's face had gone pale. "Wrong how?" "I don't know yet," Ethan admitted. "But I'm going to find out." Over the next 2 days, Ethan barely slept. He told Claire he needed space to think, which bought him time, and he used every hour of it. He went back through old shared cloud accounts, old email threads, anything Claire might have had access to, and buried in an old shared photo backup, the kind of account no one thinks to check, he found messages. Texts synced from a phone she'd once linked to their joint iCloud without realizing it would carry over. At first, the messages between Claire and Marcus were what he expected. Declarations of feeling, guilt-laced affection, the kind of thing that made his hands shake with fresh fury. Then the tone shifted, and Ethan's fury turned to something colder. "Once everything is signed, he won't be able to stop us," one message from Marcus read. "Dad says the transfer has to happen before the honeymoon," read another, from Claire. "Otherwise the window closes. He trusts you completely," Marcus had written. "That's the only reason this works." Ethan read the thread 3 times, his pulse hammering in his ears. This wasn't about romance anymore. This was about him, his company, his accounts, something being transferred. Something that needed his signature, something with a closing window tied to his wedding day. The affair wasn't the story. The affair was the distraction. Someone had been building toward something much larger, and his wedding, his actual wedding, appeared to be the trigger. He sat there in the dark of his living room and felt the ground shift beneath everything he thought he understood about his own life. He could have canceled the wedding right then. Any sane person would have. Instead, Ethan did something that surprised even him. He drove to Claire's apartment the next morning, sat across from her at her kitchen table, and said the 4 words she least expected to hear. "I still want to marry you." Claire's eyes filled with tears of what looked like genuine relief. "You mean it? I love you," Ethan said. And the terrible thing was, some small, stubborn part of him still did. "I want to move forward. I want us to figure this out together." Claire threw her arms around him, sobbing into his shoulder, and over her head Ethan stared at the wall with eyes as flat and cold as glass. Marcus heard the news within the hour and showed up at Ethan's office that afternoon, practically giddy with relief. "Man, I know things are weird, but I'm really glad you're not letting this destroy everything. I promise you, whatever happened, it's over. I'll be there tomorrow. I'll stand up for you like I always have." "I know you will," Ethan said, and shook his hand, and felt absolutely nothing when he did. What Claire and Marcus didn't know was that the moment Ethan left Claire's apartment that morning, he'd driven straight to the office of Diane Weller, a corporate attorney he'd worked with for years and trusted completely. He laid every message, every screenshot, every account log on her desk. "I want everything locked down," he told her. "Every account, every asset, every signature authority. If anyone tries to move money or transfer ownership of anything connected to Ashcroft Holdings, I want to know within the hour." Diane had looked at the messages for a long time before speaking. "Ethan, this isn't just infidelity. This looks like fraud, possibly conspiracy. You need to be very careful about what you sign between now and the wedding." "I don't intend to sign anything," Ethan said. "I intend to find out exactly how deep this goes." And it went deeper than he ever imagined. Within days, Diane's investigator uncovered forged signatures, his own signature, replicated with unsettling accuracy, on preliminary transfer documents tied to a 20% stake in his company. The paper trail led first to Marcus, who had access to Ethan's digital signature templates from years of handling his contracts. But Marcus wasn't the architect. He was a pawn. The real name behind the wire transfers, the shell account, the legal filings prepared and waiting to be executed, was Daniel Morgan, Claire's father. Ethan sat in Diane's office staring at the financial records until the numbers blurred. Daniel Morgan was drowning in debt, failed investments, a business on the verge of collapse, creditors closing in. And somewhere in the wreckage of his finances, he'd landed on a plan. His daughter's marriage to a successful, trusting young CEO wasn't just good fortune. It was an opportunity. Claire would gain shared access to assets after the marriage. Documents would move quietly through the excitement and distraction of wedding planning. Marcus, desperate and in love and promised a cut, would provide the technical access needed to make it all look legitimate. Once the ink was dry and the honeymoon began, the transfer would be nearly impossible to unwind. The woman Ethan had planned to spend his life with had been positioned, whether willingly or not, he still didn't know, as the key that would unlock his own destruction. He closed the folder and sat in silence for a long moment. "What do you want to do?" Diane asked gently. "I want to marry her," Ethan said, and when Diane's eyebrows shot up in alarm, he explained exactly what he meant. If this is the part of the story where your jaw is on the floor, comment right now and tell me if you think Claire knew everything from the start. I want to hear your theories before the ending. And if you haven't already, tap that subscribe button, because what happens at the altar is going to be unlike anything you've seen on this channel. The wedding day arrived exactly as planned. 300 guests filled the grand ballroom of the Whitmore estate, white roses cascading down every aisle, string quartet playing softly as the afternoon light poured through tall windows. Claire walked down the aisle in a gown she'd dreamed about since she was a little girl, radiant, smiling, utterly convinced that whatever storm had passed through their relationship had cleared for good. She had no idea that every document in her father's plan had already been quietly frozen. She had no idea that federal and local investigators, alerted by Diane days earlier, were seated discreetly among the wedding guests. She had no idea that the forgiveness she'd been so grateful for was, in fact, the closing of a trap. Marcus stood beside Ethan at the altar in his tailored best man suit, smiling for photographs, utterly certain that loyalty and time would eventually smooth things over between them. The ceremony began. Vows were exchanged in soft, practiced tones. And then the officiant turned to Ethan and asked the question 300 people had gathered to hear answered. Do you, Ethan, take Claire to be your lawfully wedded wife? Silence stretched through the ballroom, long enough to feel wrong. Claire's smile faltered. Ethan? She whispered. Ethan looked at her. Really looked at her, the woman he had loved for 4 years, the woman who might have loved him too, somewhere underneath all the lies. Then he looked past her, to Marcus, whose smile was already fading into confusion. No, Ethan said. The word landed like a gunshot in the quiet room. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Claire's mother half rose from her seat. Claire herself stood frozen, disbelief written across every feature of her face. Ethan, what are you? There's something everyone here deserves to see, Ethan said, turning to face the guests, his voice carrying clearly across the stunned silence. Before we go any further, Diane stepped forward from the second row, a tablet in hand, and nodded to 2 men near the back exit. Men Claire and her father hadn't clocked as anything other than wedding guests until that exact moment. Screens along the side of the ballroom, set up earlier that morning under the pretense of a photo slideshow, flickered to life instead with something else entirely. Messages, timestamps, forged signature comparisons side by side with Ethan's real one. Wire transfer records. Daniel Morgan's name, highlighted, connected by a web of lines to shell accounts and legal filings. The room that had gathered to celebrate a wedding was now staring, horrified, at evidence of a conspiracy. No, Claire breathed, turning in a slow circle as the truth unfolded in front of everyone she loved. No, this isn't. Dad, what did you do? Daniel Morgan, 3 rows back in his father of the bride tuxedo, went the color of ash and began pushing toward the exit. Security, positioned there since the ceremony began, blocked his path. Marcus grabbed Ethan's arm. Ethan, please, whatever this is, we can talk about it. Don't do this here. You had months to talk to me, Marcus, Ethan said quietly, pulling his arm free. You chose to lie instead. Every single day. Claire spun toward Marcus, mascara already streaking down her face. You told me it was handled. You told me none of this would ever come out. Me? Marcus shot back, panic cracking his voice. This was your father's plan from the beginning. You just forged his signature, Claire snapped. You just helped my father steal from the man I was supposed to marry. The ballroom had descended into chaos. Guests murmuring, some standing, phones raised, Claire's mother sobbing into her hands. 2 officers who had been quietly stationed near the entrance moved forward and asked Daniel Morgan to step outside with them. He didn't resist. He simply looked, for one final moment, at his daughter, before he was led away. Claire turned back to Ethan, tears streaming freely now, gown pooling around her feet like something already forgotten. I didn't know how far he'd take it, she said, voice breaking. I swear to you, Ethan, I tried to stop it. I told my father I wanted out months ago. Marcus threatened to tell you everything if I backed out. He said my father would ruin us both. I was scared. I was trying to protect. Protect what, Claire? Ethan asked, and for the first time, real exhaustion crept into his voice instead of anger. Yourself? Me? Because from where I stood, it looked like you protected the plan for months while I planned a wedding with a woman who didn't exist. I loved you, Claire whispered. That part was never a lie. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Maybe it was true. Maybe some small corner of what they'd had was real. But 4 years of trust had been rewritten, day by day, by a lie so complete he couldn't find the true parts buried inside it anymore, and he no longer had the strength to go digging for them. Maybe you loved me, he said finally. Maybe you didn't. But you lied to me every single day, Claire. And I can't build a marriage on top of a foundation made of that. He turned and walked out of the ballroom alone, past 300 stunned guests, past the wreckage of the life he'd almost signed away without knowing it, and out into the late afternoon light. Marcus was arrested within the week on charges of forgery and conspiracy to commit fraud. Daniel Morgan faced a lengthening list of financial crimes as investigators unraveled, just how many other people he tried to pull into schemes like this one before Ethan. Claire was never criminally charged. Insufficient evidence that she'd actively participated rather than simply known. But she lost everything else that mattered. Her fiancé, her best friend, who'd turned on her the moment things fell apart. Her father, who'd used her as a tool without ever really asking if she was willing to be used. Ethan sold the house within 2 months, the one where it had all started, where 2 wine glasses had sat outside a bathroom door and changed the entire trajectory of his life. His company not only survived the ordeal but came out of it with cleaner books, tighter security, and a board that trusted him more, not less, for how he'd handled the crisis with quiet precision instead of public rage. Months later, sitting on Helen's porch with 2 beers between them, his sister asked the question she'd been wondering since that terrible night. "Do you regret it? Not marrying her?" Ethan considered it for a long moment, watching the sun sink behind the trees. "I thought I lost the woman I loved that night," he said finally. "Coming home early, walking in on that shower. For a long time I thought that was the worst moment of my life." He took a slow sip, shook his head. "But I didn't lose the woman I loved. I lost the illusion that was keeping me trapped. There's a difference. It just took me a while to see it." Helen smiled and bumped her shoulder against his. Somewhere down the street, kids were laughing, a sprinkler ticking back and forth across a lawn. The ordinary sound of a life continuing exactly as it should. Sometimes betrayal doesn't destroy your life. Sometimes it destroys the illusion that was keeping you trapped inside a smaller one. Ethan thought coming home early had ruined his wedding. He never imagined it had saved his life. If Ethan's story moved you tonight, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss the next one. This channel is full of stories exactly like this, where the biggest twist is never the one you saw coming first. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from and what you would have done in Ethan's shoes at that altar. And if you love this one, hit like and share it with someone who needs a reminder that sometimes losing everything is how you finally get your real life back. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next story.